good evening, folks. Welcome to the Dave Englishman Show with your host, Dave Englishman. Thanks for tuning in. I again want to talk to you for a moment about the Convention of States. I hope that a lot of you become active in the Convention of States and you sign the petition. I will put that in the show notes. It'll be one of the links. I want to talk to you a little bit about some things tonight that struck me on a personal note, and I want to tie all that up with what's going on in our country and what we can do about it. So I try to do this show not for me. I do this for you. All I hope is that a few people get something out of this and that they can make a better informed decision come election day if you're sitting on the fence. There's a lot of things going on out in our world, in our country, that the mainstream media is not reporting. And I think it's important for everyone to get a little flavor of some things that you're not seeing. In this way here, that including what you're seeing on mainstream media, some of it you'll question the mainstream media, and other pieces of the mainstream media you'll put the stuff that I present to you and that together, and you'll go, wow, now I understand why we're in the predicament we are in. So I wanted to start this show off a different way this evening, and I decided to do something even different and more radical than that. So last week I received the email from the school, my kid's school, that the kids were going to go back to school, and they wrote us how the kids were going to go back to school and all of the protocols and policies. And I read it, and I didn't say much. I mulled it over in my head, and the more that I thought about it, the angrier I became. And I'll tell you why. And then I'm going to get into how all of this ties into my personal life and how it ties into your life. So my kids are twins. When they first learned how to speak, they spoke twin babble. A lot of twins do. They don't assimilate English or the native language that the parents speak. And they'll say a few words, but other than that, they have their own language, and they can actually communicate and give direction to each other. It's quite funny, actually. But we decided we wanted to put our kids into a school which had speech therapy as one of its offerings. And the school that they go to, it's a very good school. They have some very good teachers. The teachers that they've had for their 2 years of pre-kindergarten have been fantastic. They were really looking forward to finishing off this year and going into kindergarten. So I get this email knowing that my kids have a speech impediment, and they're still working on speaking. I mean, they speak fine, but they're still behind their classmates as far as the words that they know and how to use them properly in a sentence, because they were still speaking twin babble for probably 6 to 7 months after the normal child begins to start assimilating their own parents' language. So they're a good 6 to 7 months behind, and we really want them to catch up and be at the same point with their classmates. So I get this letter, and it says that the kids are going to be wearing face masks, that there's going to be few kids to a bus. If parents were driving them to school before, maybe they can continue driving them. Thank God we've had our kids driven to school. But I'm thinking to myself, these are kids that are 5 years old that have a speech impediment to see a speech therapist, and now the superintendent's mandated that these kids wear masks. I know a lot of you that watch this live in Ottawa, where you right now, in Ottawa, Canada, where you have a mask mandated order that you all have to wear a mask out in public as soon as you leave your home. So I get that you guys are in tune with this. So understand you're going to work for 8 to 10 hours a day with a mask on your face, right? And how uncomfortable you feel. And then put yourself in the shoes of a 5-year-old and how they would feel. And what's going to happen in class, what's going to happen in the school, and how much trouble all of these kids are going to get in, because kids are kids, and especially at that age, they're curious. They want to learn. They want to interact. They want to grow. They want to have a social engagements with other people, especially kids their own age. So I'm getting pissed reading this email, and the superintendent has sent me emails inviting me to go on to the Zoom meetings that they have for this act of going back to school. And I haven't, for the simple reason that if I do, I'll probably be thrown out of the school. I'll probably never be able to go back. So in this email, they said, if you'd like to respond to us and give us your feedback, please feel free to do so. Now, these were anonymous, and quite frankly, I don't care if the school finds out that I wrote this. I really don't. So I'm going to read you what I wrote them, and then we're going to get into tonight's show. So this was to the superintendent, which means the superintendent and the teachers' unions. You should be ashamed of yourselves for allowing the liberal socialists to propagandize COVID-19 into a tool to penalize the middle class, both parents and children, when it's been proven through science and data using facts that children have a 0.2% chance of transmittal to adults. That's 0.2%. This was written, the 0.2% I got out of an article that was written in March. But we're going to get deeper into that as we get into the show and get into the content. Chance of transmittal to adults. You've been complicit in the egregious war on Americans. Did you know that 20,000 children attended daycare throughout the United States during the lockdowns, and there is not one single reported case of cross-transmittal between a child and a teacher or a caregiver? Not one. Yet you're going to mandate that children as young as 5 years of age wear a mask and they social distance. Are you kidding? Social distance? You expect 4, 5, and 6-year-old kids to social distance while at this stage of their development, all they want to do is socialize because their curiosity craves the interaction. Furthermore, masks make it harder for kids who have a speech impediment and therapy to learn and grow and speak more clearly when inhibited by these god-awful face diapers. It's not healthy to wear a mask all day, every day. Again, you should be ashamed for following this lunacy which puts our most precious assets on the back burner. More and more Americans are waking up to the fact that this entire fiasco has been promoted for political purposes. The silent majority, which is you and me, the silent majority will no longer be silent. You're playing with people's lives, their ability to provide for their families, and you're screwing with their children. If you think we're going to sit quietly by while you, the DNC, and the teachers' unions conspire against us average middle-income Americans, you've seriously made a miscalculation in your judgment. We will work to vote every single one of you out. We put in conservatives who have a conservative ideology to make sure that our children learn proper history. So you'd better start reading up on the real numbers of COVID-19, because otherwise your decisions could be to your detriment and your peril. So yeah, I sent that to the superintendent, and I don't care. This affects me on a level of, not just worrying about my kids' educational future, but it bothers me on an emotional level, because I can't imagine myself, remembering all the way back to the age of 5 when I was in kindergarten, having to go to school wearing a mask. I thought kindergarten was hard enough as it was. Trying to make friends and trying to adapt to going to school. And just the hours of being away from my family, my grandparents, my mom. So I can't imagine these kids going for 6 or 7 hours a day wearing a mask on their face. Having known that they were in school a short, almost 5 months now, and that they didn't have to. Things were different. You see, this is going to be the new norm, according to the Democrats. These kids aren't going to be able to assimilate into a new norm. Our generation of children are going to be scarred by this. All of these kids that have been thrown out of school this last March, they are going to be mentally strapped by this for the rest of their lives. And then, not to mention, the trillions of dollars that the Democrats want to still waste on top of the $4 trillion already spent to send people an extra $600 a week to keep them out of work instead of going back to work. So yeah, this whole thing has been an absolute disaster. So let's get into the show, and then I'll tie everything up at the end on how this affects me and how it affects you. So if you remember in last week's show, I talked about how the CIA has been involved in the media since 1953. This article, and I'll post this again in the show notes, was written in Rolling Stone magazine and was written by Carl Bernstein, a very good journalist and a very good detective journalist. And he proves that the CIA has been involved and complicit in the news media, whether on television, radio, or in newsprint, since 1953. So I just put this up here as a refresher. So I wanted to do this show on exactly these points a week and a half ago when I started researching. And then a friend of mine sent me a video in which a woman is reading off some of the same things that I'm going to read off. And I was like, wow, that's pretty funny that somebody else tied all this together. But I'm going to tie it all together in a different way than she did. She just read this out and said, America, you need to wake up. So I'm going to prove to you that a lot of this stuff has come to fruition. So let's get into this. This is the 45 communist goals, and it was read into the congressional record in 1963, January of 1963. So, are you ready for this? Because I'm going to read them all, but I'm going to highlight certain ones, and then we're going to come back around and talk about those ones. So it says, number 1, the United States should accept coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. Think about that for a minute. The United States should be willing to capitulate in preference to engaging in atomic war. Okay. Number 3, develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. 4, permit free trade between all nations regardless of communist affiliation and regardless of whether or not items could be used for war. All you need to think about now, folks, because communist Russia no longer exists, even though there's probably a communist bent within Russia, and I'm sure that Putin still, yearns for the days of good old communist Russia. But now you've got to think about Red China. Think about that. 5, extending long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites. So this is the communist agenda. Now I'm going to get a little bit deeper, and then I'm going to come right back to this point here. 6, provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. 7, grant recognition of Red China and admission of Red China into the United Nations. 6, provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. So written by Russians, communists in Russia, and they want Red China accepted into the United Nations. So right now, who's benefiting the most as a country by the infiltration of the United States by communists? Right now, currently, Red China. Number 5, don't forget, was extend long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites. So this was written by Russians, but who's benefiting now? China. And Russia asked in their communist goals for the recognition of China into the UN. 8, set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in 1955 to settle the Germany question by free elections under supervision of the UN. You notice the UN is here a lot, it's mentioned. We're going to keep going. Number 9, prolong the conference to ban atomic tests because the United States has agreed to suspend all testing as long as negotiations are in progress. That gave the Soviets, the Red Russians, a chance to catch up to us on the nuclear bomb. So they used the United Nations laws against us, and we allowed it to happen. Why did we allow it to happen? Number 10, allow all Soviet satellites individual representation within the United Nations. Why would they have wanted that back in the 1950s and the 60s and the 70s? Because they could control a bigger percentage of the vote within the UN to gang up on the United States. And meanwhile, they were planting people within the United States in the key positions in the bureaucracy and in government. We're going to keep going. Number 11, promote the United Nations as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one world government with its own independent armed forces. Already happened, folks. A number of these things have already happened. Number 12. You ready for this? Resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. Number 13. Think of your children. They're not allowed to do this in school anymore. Number 13. Do away with loyalty oaths. Pledge of Allegiance. It's a biggie. Number 14. Continue giving Russia access to the United States Patent Office. Again, no longer Russia. Communist Red China. Patent Office. China. Patent Office. Products. Patent Office. Money. Patent Office. Our debt. Theft. Intellectual property. It's going on all the time. Devaluation of their dollar. Everything they do is designed to hurt the United States. Here's a good one. Number 15. We're going to talk about this one a little later. Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States of America. Capture one or both of the political parties. Capture. Number 16. Use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming that their activities violate civil rights. Spoke about this, I think, at show number 4, and I talked to you about how the Democrats can't get anything through government as a bill, and that's why, you know, people who vote for them, the far lefties, they're all screaming, well, there's 1,500 bills, and the GOP hasn't passed them. That's because the Democrat bills are like a jerk-off session. They amount to nothing. What they want to propose is so un-American it's not funny. So what they've done is these left-wing bureaucratic judges, these political judges, who are supposed to be unbiased, you're supposed to basically have blind liberty, but these biased judges rule in the Democrats' favor to force laws upon us that have never been written and passed in Congress. You understand what they do? Here's a real good one. This is probably the number one detriment to our country so far. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of the teachers' associations and put the party line in the textbooks. And you're wondering why Antifa and Black Lives Matter is rampant, roaming the streets, causing violence and mayhem and killing police officers. Did you know that since January of 2020 until the end of June that 161 police officers have been killed in the line of duty this year alone? But yeah, the cops are the problem. I'm telling you, folks, it's a sick society that these people are trying to take over. And they've got a lot of people who are on their side. They're real fruit nut, depraved, far left morons that still call the Democrat Party the Democrat Party. I'm sorry, but it's not the Democrat Party. I'm sorry to John F. Kennedy that his party has become a corrupt cesspool of human filth. That's the truth. And if he were here and alive, he'd be disgusted. Number 18, gain control of all student newspapers. That's high schools and colleges and universities. Why? Because then you control what they read, what they think, and what they think normalcy is. And I told you at the beginning of the show as a reminder again, who has been putting plants in the media since 1953? The Central Intelligence Agency is behind this because they have been infected. Remember Kennedy's Secret Society speech from last show? I showed you that Kennedy made the statement that he wanted to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind. Why would he want to do that? And then it's funny that the man who actually did the commission on his death was the CIA director at the time of the Bay of Pigs, which caused Kennedy to start having a lot of doubts in the CIA, and that was the Warren Commission. That was Warren. Chief Justice Warren. It's a small world, folks. Why would anybody take the man who Kennedy hated with a passion and put him as the head of the commission to investigate his death? Things just don't add up on that level. So 19, kind of what's going on today, folks. Use student riots to foment public protests around and against programs or organizations that are under communist attack. So you see what's going on today, right? Trump makes a statement and they come out and they attack him on it. And they use these shock troops of theirs to try and conform the public to what they want. And I'll get into that a little bit further too. So number 20 is infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policy making positions. Sounds pretty familiar with what's going on today, right? 21, gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. Interesting. So we're going to get into that in a little bit too, on a different level. 22, continue discrediting American culture by degrading all form of artistic expression. Statues coming down? Oh my God. Say it isn't so. Another one, they fulfilled it. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substituting shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms of art. Yeah. So you go to the art museum in New York and apparently there's a picture of Jesus, but it looks like a penis. That's art. Number 24, eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. But notice that it's only obscenities if conservatives are using them, especially with the advent of social media, in violation of our First Amendment rights in this country. Thank God for Parler. Number 25, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and on TV. Well, I think we hit there about 20 years ago. About that. 26, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Can I ask you something here? So at the beginning of this was all about the United Nations. Have you noticed something about the last section that I've been reading? Every single thing that I've read is what the Democrat Party stands for. Think about that. Think about that for a minute. Weird, huh? Here's a real good one. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. discredit the Bible, and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. And I'm going to get into that in a minute too. Number 28, eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the ground that it violates the principles of separation of church and state. We're there, folks. We've been there for 40-some years. Yep, that's done. Number 30, I remember as a kid saying the Lord's Prayer in school, and a lot of you that are older than probably 47 will all remember that as well. I think younger than 47, 46, you won't remember that. Number 30, folks, this is happening right now before our very eyes. 30 is discredit the American founding fathers. Present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. Well, hang on, folks. Have you ever read the Constitution? If you haven't read the Constitution, I challenge you, I strongly encourage you to go and read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States and read what it is in it for you. What's in it for your children, how it promotes the freedom and the liberty for you to do basically and become anything you want within this great country. We're not a perfect nation. No human being is perfect. And we're not a perfect nation. But I can tell you that out of all the nations of the world, we're the only ones to publicly renounce slavery. We're the only country in the world that went to war against its own brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers, to fight for what is written in the Constitution and our Bill of Rights. So you see the left, they're so effed up because they say the Constitution is bad because we had slavery, and then they promote the 1619 education agenda, which is all BS. And that is something that I would bring up to the superintendent, but I'd get kicked out of the school. So there's a lot wrong with this country. And as a country, we need to do some soul searching because the Constitution was written by brilliant, amazing men who tried to think of every single thing they could and the protections from one level of government against the other so that there would never be tyranny and that we would always have our liberty. Well, unfortunately, folks, the left works tirelessly, day in, day out, morning, noon, and night, to uproot the basic principles of this country, to uproot what the Founding Fathers wrote that was a gift. It's almost like God interceded in these men and wrote the perfect binding document to give us, granted us, our freedom, our liberty, to have the human experience without the threat of tyranny or somebody else sticking their jackboot on our throats. And all of this crap was exacerbated by a cop who put his jackboot on the throat of George Floyd. But how many people out there remember George Floyd's name? You don't, because the news media is concentrated on the peaceful riots, the peaceful protests. Oh, don't mind the burning building burning in the background of the camera. It's a peaceful protest. Let's get back to the notes. I think you're kind of picking up what I'm putting down here. So 31 is belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the ground that it was only a minor part in the big picture. Give more emphasis to Russian history since the communists took over. Well, again, folks, not the Russians doing this anymore. They may be part of it, but China. Have you noticed that there's a lot of books now that are written by Chinese writers for our kids? I've read some of these books to my kids, and I say nothing, but I read the book and I'm like, I don't want to read this book to my kids again. I don't know how to tell them that I don't want to read it because they think the book's cool because it's got cool pictures in it. But in some cases, they're promoting this whole political correctness of nobody's a winner, everybody gets a freaking participation trophy. And I'm sorry, folks, if you want to learn to and you want to grow up, because you all have to grow up. That's a problem for these Antifa type morons. They haven't grown up, but we all have to grow up. And sometimes growing up, you got to win, you got to lose. Because you find out who you are in the depth, in the core of your body when you lose. And you figure out how to become better. And it doesn't matter what you lose at, but you lose and you learn how to come back. That's the lesson. And the left doesn't want these kids to come back. Do you understand? It's another form of attack. And yet these kids on the left, these far left, unhinged, moronic wingnuts who are burning down buildings and beating up people in their businesses and looting, right? And then tearing down statues of men who actually fought for the Underground Railroad. Yeah. Like, where are we going with all of this? These people don't even know their own history, and yet they're claiming that they're rioting for Black Lives Matter, and yet they're tearing down statues of men who were blacks who fought for the cause to fight against slavery. It's unbelievable. It's almost like you're living in bizarro 180-degree la-la land. And for the life of me, I'm getting to the point where I'm so frustrated with all this crap. I just want more people to wake up and say, enough of this effing shit. We need to move on with our lives. We need to get out of this crap and move forward. And the indictments need to get handed down now. There's over 45,000 federal indictments that are sealed, that are waiting to be handed down, and they're coming. But I can't, I don't think I can wait until Labor Day weekend. I don't think I can do that. This is really starting to take its toll on me, and I'm sure it's taking its toll on a number of you out there, because you see what your families and your kids are going through. You see what your coworkers are going through. You have to put up with the crap. Am I standing far enough from that person? Or you're outside, you don't have a mask on, and somebody's berating you? Yeah, it happened to me a couple of different times. Where's your mask? You have to put on your mask. God, you're going to cause my death. People are unhinged. They believe whatever CNN and all the rest of these manufactured CIA news sources keep putting out there as their talking points. It's ridiculous. So I'm going to get into the actual science of this in just a second. So 32, support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, and mental health clinics, etc., bar none. 33, eliminate all laws or procedures which interfere with the operation of the communist apparatus. Number 34, eliminate the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Joe McCarthy ring a bell? If you don't know who Joe McCarthy is, I'll put some links in the show. You're going to read about Alger Hiss, and you're going to read about Joe McCarthy, and you're going to read about a lot of different things that you probably never thought you'd want to learn. But once you start reading this stuff, you say, wow, I can't get enough. I got to really dig into this, because I'm starting to see how my country's been infiltrated over a long period of time by socialist, communist, Marxists who want the utter destruction of this country. And they don't care about you. They don't care about me. They don't care about liberty. They don't care about justice. They only care about two things: power and control. Power and control. Power and control. Okay? Here's another good one for you, folks. Discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. The whole Mueller report was a discredit to the FBI. And now Mueller's being investigated by Durham and Barr because they exceeded their authority. They knew the truth literally on the day that Mueller walked in to take over that position, and he never came clean to the American public. They kept up a Russian collusion hoax for 2 full years, and when that didn't pan out, they went straight into an impeachment. When that didn't pan out, they went straight into a pandemic. But there was 1,000 other little things all along the way to keep Americans distracted while they worked and weaved their evil web of lies and deceit into our culture until we have this today. Voila. Chaos, madness, and corruption. Number 36, infiltrate and gain control of the unions. I'm going to tell you about something else in a minute about unions. Number 37, infiltrate and gain control of big business. Last week, an article came out in which they're saying that corporate boardrooms over the last 10 to 15 years in America have been infected with socialists and radicals. Yeah. And meanwhile, all the businesses that are shut down happen to be mom and pop restaurants and things of that nature. But the big box stores with all the corporate gurus and all the socialists on their board, they're all open. Starting to get a handle of what's going on. Number 38, transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to the social agencies. And what are they pushing for right now? Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and even Biden are saying, you can't send a police officer to a rape anymore. You need to send a social worker. Well, let me ask you a question. If you're a woman out there and you're thinking of voting for Biden for whatever reason, I want you to ask yourself this question. If you were raped, who are you going to call? Are you going to call the police who you want to come down there and find this creep and arrest him and get him off the streets so you know that you'll be safe from him for the rest of your life? Or do you want a social worker to come down and console you? Meanwhile, the asshole's getting away and never to be seen again by you, but he's out raping other women. And because he is, you're reading the stories about it and you're in fear for your own life and your own safety for however long this demented lunatic is out on the streets. So who are you voting for? It's a good question, right? Here's another great one. Dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over all those who oppose the communist goals. Been happening for 40 years. Please examine your life. Just think back. It's been taking hold in this country since JFK. They killed him for a specific reason. Nothing the Democrat Party ever does is by chance. Everything they do was planned and has a purpose. Everything. You ready for number 40, which I think is the most detrimental to them all? Discredit the family as an institution and encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Well, folks, that's been here since the days of Lyndon Baines Johnson. Remember? He's the one who promoted a black fatherless home. How do you ruin the family unity? Well, you get rid of religion, you get rid of the father, you make divorce easy and unquestionable, and there's no rules, and everybody is wanting to covet somebody else's spouse, and because it's being presented to us on our news media 24/7 that sex is good, sex is healthy, you can have sex with anybody. Dr. Fauci made a comment a couple of months ago that had to wear a mask wherever you went. But if you wanted to have unprotected sex with a complete stranger, he wouldn't talk you out of it. It was like, you're doing it at your own risk. True. Go look it up on the internet. I'll post the link. I'll post the link. Number 42. 41. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of their parents. What are they doing right now? They're promoting that these kids shouldn't be listening to what their parents are telling them about masks and COVID-19. Don't listen to your parents. Listen to us in the state. Remember Hillary Clinton made the comment that, it takes a community to raise your kid? I'm sorry, Hillary, but the community that you want to raise my kid in, I don't want any part of that community. I'm sorry. I've already prepared in case the worst happens in our society. I'm prepared for it. I'm ready. I know a lot of people aren't, but I don't want your new normal, and I don't want your form of community. Sorry, thank you very much, but I think socialism sucks, and I think communists are complete and utter degenerates. So 42, the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition. So they're no longer peaceful protests, they're violent riots that are covered as peaceful protests. See how that one works? And students and special interest groups should rise up and make a united force to solve all economic, political, and social problems. They now call it social justice problems, and they're social justice warriors. but their social problems. So that statement alone has already been proven to come true. So what I've read you so far, folks, nothing that I've read you here has not yet come to fruition. And I'm not done. 43, overflow all colonial governments before native populations are ready for self-government. Well, in our country, they just say that America has no right to the land because we killed the Native American Indians and drove them from their lands. Well, every country in the world originally had some native beings, and every country in the world has been taken over. Every country in the world has had the slave trade. Every single different identity and culture has been enslaved at one point in history or another. The Indians that lived on this continent and their descendants today that still live here, those ancestors fought wars against each other. The Sioux against the Métis against the Mohawk, yada, 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 goes down the line. They took slaves. They killed the men and took their wives as sex slaves and as new wives for them. They murdered their children. It wasn't, all golden sunsets and flowers and smoking the peace pipe and getting stoned all fucking day as an Indian. Excuse my language. But I'm pissed at all this crap because they try to shove this down everybody's throat. They want to get rid of the Washington Redskins and every other friggin' sports team that has anything to do with indigenous Native American Indians. Yet there's no American indigenous Indians that live in this country that are upset with the name the Washington Redskins. Except for the people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all the rest of their stupid, cracked up crew and their idiotic followers and Antifa and BLM. Sorry, folks, it's the truth. Truth hurts. Sorry I swore. 44. This already happened too. Internationalize the Panama Canal. Why? The United States can't shut it down and have control over it to stop trade from a foreign enemy. And number 45, repeal the Connolly Reservation so the United States cannot prevent the World Court from seizing jurisdiction over United States domestic problems. Give the World Court jurisdiction over all domestic problems and give the World Court jurisdiction over nations and all, emphasis all, individuals alike. You understand what that means, right? It means U.S. citizenship would mean nothing. We'd be citizens of the world and we'd be under direct threat of the United Nations and a one world government. So now let's get into the rest of the story. So, religion's under assault in the United States, right? So, for example, in Newsom's California, even in-home church gatherings are banned due to coronavirus. In-home. So, I decide I want to have a Bible study or a prayer group or have the pastor come over to my house, and I have over 4 or 5 other couples that I know who want to come and join us. Oh, no. You're not allowed to do that in your home. The privacy of your own home, you can no longer do that because that is now considered a violation of the law. That is a constitutional violation right there. And he's being sued right now for that law and a few others. So I already talked about the CIA infiltrating the media since 1953. So I want to ask you as an American a question. So you already know that Jeffrey Epstein is a pedophile, right? So my question is, Jeffrey Epstein's been a pedophile for a long, long time. And a lot of very important, prominent people knew that Jeffrey Epstein has been a pedophile for a very long time. How did he get away with it? And how did he stay under the radar? And how did he stay away from the law for over 30 years? Good question, right? Gotta ask why. So Kennedy wanted to smash the CIA. The CIA is corrupt. We already know that the CIA under John Brennan was corrupt through this whole Russia collusion spy crap that was going on against Trump, which was perpetrated by Obama. So we also know that the CIA is involved in black ops. We know that the CIA has been infiltrated by socialists and communists. And we know that the CIA also got in touch with the British intelligence and used the British intelligence and other members of the Five Eyes to spy on Trump. And these are the countries that are most vehemently opposed to Trump as President of the United States. Why? Because Trump's exposing them all, right? So let's get into the story here. So what if I was to present to you that Jeffrey Epstein was a tool for the CIA? What if Jeffrey Epstein had this pedo island and this airplane called the Lolita Express, in which he kept a black book of all the people who flew on the plane and all the people who went to the island and dates and times. And his girlfriend, Ghislaine, knows where the copies of all of the sex videos are of all the different people who were involved on Pedo Island, engaged in sex with underage girls. Let's just say the CIA didn't use all that information to blackmail politicians into doing what they want. Wouldn't it be just outrageous that that's what's been going on underneath the noses of Americans for 30 plus years? That politicians have been blackmailed? I mean, look at Adam Schiff. He gets up in front of the United States Congress and reads a completely false narrative and gets away with it. Why would you do such a thing? You either have to be a complete psychotic individual who has a propensity of habitual lying and has zero conscience and no integrity and no morality to get up and do something like that, or you have an agenda, or you're part of the agenda, or you've been blackmailed to partake in the agenda. Not very many other choices, folks. That's about all there is. So when it comes down to it, because it doesn't matter what definition, it all started with the root of evil, right? Whether he's a pedo and got blackmailed, or whether he's just a complete dipshit and he's anti-American, he's a socialist and a communist, it doesn't matter. All of them are all rooted in one word: evil. And these people are all evil. So, we have what I believe has been a protected Epstein, and you have a CIA which has been blackmailing senators, congressmen, women, people of prominence in the judiciary. Won't say any names. There's been a lot of judgments that have come down against conservatism, and he was put in there as a conservative. You can figure it out for yourself. But you start looking at everything that's going on, and you can plainly say that our government has been infected by a root of evil, that these people are all either willing co-conspirators in the agenda, or there's a lot of them that have been blackmailed into being part of the conspiracy against America. And it's a conspiracy against all of us. So, you know that Epstein's dead. His girlfriend, Ghislaine, was just caught. She's now sitting in a federal prison in New York City. And because she has been brought in, she is due to testify on a lot of different levels. And so there's a woman, female judge, who lives in New Jersey, who was put on to the Deutsche Bank case, in which Deutsche Bank's being investigated, and they're being sued for $115 million for their participation with Jeffrey Epstein and a lot of other things. So Ghislaine knows what's going on in all of that because she has the files. And so a gentleman shows up at this judge's house in a FedEx truck, dressed as a FedEx delivery driver. And when the judge's son opened up the door, the FedEx driver, the alleged FedEx driver, shot the son dead. The father then comes to find out what all the commotion is about, and he gets shot multiple times. He's in the ICU in the hospital, and the FedEx driver got away. Who can set that up? Think back just the last couple of minutes. So I also bet that you never heard that Epstein's personal banker, the guy who worked for Deutsche Bank, hung himself and committed suicide. Not ironic? So you have Epstein, who apparently commits suicide in his jail cell right after he's released from Suicide Watch. The cameras went out. The guards never showed up. The guards fell asleep. His bunk buddy never saw a damn thing. And yet he committed suicide. The banker committed suicide. And now the judge who's investigating an offshoot of this case with the bank that his famous banker represented ends up committing suicide. Is Ghislaine safe? Are you starting to piece all of this together? This is way deeper than just some unknown, high-profile, unknown pedophile, but high-profile corporate business guy on Wall Street for 30 years, silent. Nobody knew a freaking thing outside of his friends and close confidants of people in powerful positions, but yet he's completely protected. And then he ends up dead, and everybody around him is slowly getting whacked. I don't know, man. Do the math. So we know the CIA, the news media, and the education system have all been compliant with the DNC. Now, there's even some members of the GOP. They're out pushing to keep your kids out of school as well. Now, remember, I read you the 45 points for the communist agenda, and they're talking about controlling the schools and the teachers' unions. So, we're going to take another look at a few other little minor things in here, and then we're going to get on to another topic to tie all this together. So this is the story about the federal judge's son. He was 20, shot dead. Her criminal attorney, defense attorney husband was critically injured 4 days after she was assigned a case linked to Jeffrey Epstein. This will be in the show notes. You can go in and read this. I've talked enough about that. I just wanted to bring to light the people around him are dying like crazy. This is the story about the banker, and he's dead. Now I want to get into face masks, and then we're going to get into how all of this affects us and what's really going on. So, this is an article put together by Nature Medicine. It says respiratory virus shedding in exhaled breath and efficacy of face masks. Some health authorities recommend that masks be worn by ill individuals to prevent onward transmission. Source control. Surgical face masks were originally introduced to protect patients from wound infection and contamination from surgeons. That was the wearer during surgical procedures, and were later adopted to protect healthcare workers against acquiring infection from their patients. However, most of the existing evidence on the filtering efficacy of face masks and respirator comes from in vitro experiments with non-biological particles, which may not be generalizable to infectious respiratory virus droplets. There is little information on the efficacy of face masks in filtering respiratory viruses and reducing viral release from an individual with respiratory infections, and most research has focused on influenza. So they're telling you they've done the research focusing on influenza, and there is no scientific study that says that face masks help or they don't. But they're being mandated on you and me and our kids, and it's for a political purpose. So we want to reopen our schools, right? So this, I I highlighted a piece. Let's review some facts. Children are by and large spared the effects of the virus according to the latest data from the CDC. Infants, little kids, and teenagers together have accounted for roughly 5% of all confirmed cases. So it's not to say that kids can't get it. They can get it. But there's been no recorded instances of them spreading it. So let's get to the base numbers of how kids get it. Roughly 5% of all confirmed cases, which translates into 0.06% of all reported deaths. 0.06%. So you might as well say none. When you go through this, it just upsets me that people are falling for this crap, hook, line, and sinker. So the COVID-linked child inflammatory syndrome that received fervent media attention last month, while scary, has even more infinitesimal numbers. Many serious childhood diseases are worse both in possible outcomes and prevalence. It goes on to say, Russell Viner, president of the UK's Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Healthcare, noted that the syndrome was not relevant to any discussion related to schools or school reopening. It says here, there is also a wealth of evidence that children do not transmit the virus at the same rate as adults. So I'm not going to read any more of this. I think you get the point. But I strongly encourage you to go in and read the whole article. It just proves to me that the whole idea of face masks is malarkey, and they're using our kids and holding them hostage for a political agenda. This one here is more evidence that most corona cases are now weaker than the flu. Evidence continues to mount that the new infections throughout much of the country are extremely mild, with the exception of some serious cases coming over the border from Mexico. Thank God for Trump, right? Thank God he shut the border down. These two facts continue to be obscured from our policy debate over containing the virus in the southern states. The governors of California, Arizona, and Texas refuse to recognize that the mild nature of these cases is good news, and going forward, they need to continue to ignore the threat of serious cases from the border. Then it goes on to say, and they are ignoring the cases from the border. Why? Distinguishing between these two phenomena has become difficult because the cause of both of them appears to have begun in late May and continued into June, especially in border states which weren't hit hard to begin with and therefore had little herd immunity to combat a new round of a spread. But the timing of these serious cases at the border combined with milder cases in the interior seems to make it clear that we are seeing two distinct waves, the second and mild American wave and the importation of Mexico's first and more serious wave. So, across the country, the number of people being tested is growing exponentially. We've tested more than any other country. But yet the left keeps saying, well, it's getting out of control. More and more people have got the disease. What they're not telling you is that more and more people have had the disease. They are asymptomatic. They carry the antibodies. But they're not in a hospital, and the death rate's coming down. So while the left is out there screaming to you on CNN and MSNBC or ABC or any of the rest of them, the New York Times, all of these rags are coming out and telling you, the number of cases is growing, it's exponential, we need to lock down and shut down everything all over again, we need to lock down through to January, no schools, blah, blah, blah. What they're not telling you is that if you take the total number of our population and divide it into the death toll, we are actually less than the yearly flu. Less than the yearly flu. And people have choice over whether or not they want to get a vaccine. So the left is beating the drums of pandemic, close everything down. I thought this was supposed to be to bend the curve. Remember that? Going back 16 or 17 weeks ago, bend the curve. Bend the curve. We bent the curve and it's the other way. But yet they want to go back into lockdown. Newsom doesn't want kids to go to school in California. When does it end? When will America wake up? When is the silent majority going to stand up and take back municipal, state, and federal government and say, enough is enough. These imbeciles are destroying our country under their communist agenda. and you've never been told that progressive stands for communist. It's the new slogan. Communism and communists, they don't want you to think of that word because, oh my God, people are going to think of Hitler and Stalin and all the dead and Mao and Cambodia. So they come out with progressive. We're progressive. We want to move forward. We want to move forward to take you to hell. Yep, that's where we're headed, folks. So, the White House trade advisor, Peter Navarro, penned a scathing op-ed blasting his colleague, Dr. Fauci. He goes on to say, Anthony Fauci's been wrong about everything I have interacted with him on. It's a great article. I highlighted this piece, and I'm going to read this to you. I encourage you to read the rest of it. Very eye-opening. It says, in a piece published by USA Today, Navarro said of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease Director Anthony Fauci that he's been wrong on just about everything I've ever interacted with him on. Navarro slammed Fauci for fighting against President Donald Trump's ban on flights from China back in January, for telling the media not to worry about the pandemic the same month, for flip-flopping on the use of masks, and for insisting that there was only anecdotal evidence in support of hydroxychloroquine to fight the virus, despite studies indicating otherwise. And folks, this is why he's under investigation. I think countless people, countless people died because they didn't have access to hydroxychloroquine because of that sick, twisted, demented person who's been reported to have been on Epstein's Island, who's probably been blackmailed by the CIA into doing whatever they want. He's a puppet. He's a puppet. Quick story. So I'm on Facebook this last week, right? And there's this moron in my town, I won't give the name, but he claims he works for the National Security Agency. So he's on there bashing Trump and saying that people who don't want to wear a face mask, that we're all nuts. We need to put on our tinfoil caps. So I started a debate with this complete piece of trash. And he comes back, he's just insulting. Every time I ask him a question, he'll never answer. Typical orange man bad, far left socialist idiot. So anyways, I can't find anything on his Facebook page. He joined like many years ago. He's got about 350 followers, but he posts nothing except for a few odd pictures, right? So he's gonna, calls me Gramps. So I figure by the looks of this guy, he's in his mid-30s. Anyways, I said Gramps can still kick your ass anytime. Not to toot my own whistle or anything, but I looked at this guy's picture. Dude, he's got bigger boobs than most women I know, right? So I'm reading all the stuff that he posted, and one thing, and this is why I started having a debate with him and why I think he's a complete piece of crap. He posted that any conservative who believes that, the use of masks are no good, or kids shouldn't go to school, that we should all die of coronavirus. All conservatives should just die of coronavirus. So I challenged him on that, and I started asking him questions. The dude can't come back and answer one single question. All he does is blow smoke up his own butt, making him think that he's, better than a double-digit IQ by calling me names like Gramps and saying that I'm a sycophant and all this other kind of crap. But meanwhile, I'd throw facts and data at him, and he'd come back and say, oh, that's disputed by Snopes. Snopes. Left-wing friggin' rag. Another one who's being communicated to by the CIA and what to answer. You kidding me? Husband and wife team, they're a bunch of drunks. Anyway, read the rest of this article because Fauci has been misleading the U.S. public for a long time. So I bring that up to this guy on my Facebook page, and he starts saying that I'm completely cracked, that it's Donald Trump who has harmed the country over this pandemic, and Dr. Fauci was saving lives. Well, let's get into a little bit about that. So, why do politicians ignore the futility and the collateral damage of lockdowns? This article goes on to explain what's been happening to regular people without coronavirus who have been locked in their homes. Suicide rates going up, depression, child abuse, sexual abuse, crime, violent crime. More people have caught the corona being at home and locked in with their relatives than they did out in public. Proven fact. You can read the studies. It's in here. So I always ask the question, why, right? Why? So one of the things that I had talked about a couple of shows ago, there's a 3-page show. This woman by the name of Anya Kamenetz from Brown University, she did this study. I spoke about this a couple of shows ago, but I wanted to mention it because we've been on this topic and beating it to death all night because I want you to get it. She's from Brown University, and she did a study. There was 916 daycare centers that remained open from the time that Trump gave the federal lockdown decree. And in that 916 daycare centers, there was 20,000 children. And they did a study on all of these kids. 0.1% had a transmission of COVID. They got COVID. 0.1. 20,000 kids, 0.1. Please do the math. Our children need to go back to school. So that leads me into kind of in the past, but moving forward in the future. Oh, here we go. CNN's put an advertisement up. Close it. And we got to go back a page because they changed their page. Oh, they locked me out. So anyway, I had up here CNN's world site. Oh, there it is. Just got hidden at the bottom, and I can't get the page to close. It says here, this is on CNN's worldwide page. The WHO stands by recommendation to not wear masks if you are not sick or not caring for someone who is. And it goes on and it talks about masks. CNN, and I'll put this in the show notes, the World Health Organization officials Monday said they still recommend people not wear face masks unless they are sick with COVID-19 or caring for someone else who is sick. There's no specific evidence to suggest that the wearing of masks by the mass population has any potential benefit. In fact, there's some evidence to suggest the opposite in the misuse of wearing a mask properly or fitting it properly. Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director of the WHO Health Emergencies Program, said at a media briefing in Geneva, Switzerland on Monday. So you have a left-wing propaganda source on their world site. They're pumping out that the WHO has no evidence that masks work. And yet on CNN US, they promote masks all the time. If you don't wear a mask, you're not patriotic. If you don't wear a mask, you're not a real American. If you're not patriotic and wear a mask, you're a racist. Yep, you're racist now if you don't wear a mask. Kid you not. Such a sick world. So let's get into how this affects me and you. If you have kids especially, or grandkids. So I'm assuming I'm speaking to a major portion of our population. If you watch my show, you either have grandkids or kids. Chances are, just saying. So this one is the Montana Teachers Union chooses an actual communist as their president. So there's a communist agenda for our country. They've already fulfilled 98% of them, and we're almost completely to the end of reaching all of their goals and putting a close on it. And yet we're supposed to believe that the teachers' unions are there to represent our children and do the best thing educationally, emotionally, and spiritually to guide our children. I'm sorry, folks, but I think we're at a crossroads here in our country. We are either going to go down the rabbit hole of what they call Democrat socialism, which is just an onslaught of socialism, which turns into communism. And then people like me who had a voice, who used their voice, once enough of the other people who could have been there to defend me end up either in a boxcar or shot or rounded up and put into a re-education camp, then it'll be me. And it'll probably be me first. It'll probably be people like me who speak out. that bothers me. I don't want to see my kids without a father. And I'm being real with you when I say this. I'm not just dreaming this up, and I'm not living in a conspiracy land. If you look at what's really going on in our country, that is the direction that we are headed in. We're not headed in a good direction. We're just not. So we have physicians who are currently still saying that they're being pressured. The ER doctors are being pressured by hospital administrators who are being pressured by governors to list COVID-19 on the death certificate of patients, no matter what. And I'm going to tell you an interesting little story from that, which is going to take us right into the next one. So I'm watching Laura Ingraham, and I think it was Monday evening, and she said, you know, my mother, she's 92, and she went for a COVID test, and she tested positive, but she had no symptoms. So she went back for another test a little while later to see if she still had it, and she tested positive. So I think Laura said she actually went back for a third time, and she still tested positive. So she says, so each time I come in, she says, am I being counted as another case, or am I only being counted once? And the woman said, oh no, you're being counted every time you come in. Excuse me, what? So you have fake reporting, right? The ER doctors are being told you count everybody as a coronavirus patient. And then the people who are going for a test, right? The people who are actually going to get a test are being counted not once, not twice, but up to 3 or 4 or however many times they go to get a test. They're not counted as one case. They're counted multiple times and added into it, which is why the Democrats can scream, Florida's going through the roof with the number of cases. They are making this crap up to keep you locked in your house, to keep your business shut, to keep you home, to keep you getting sicker, to keep your kids out of school and use your kids as political pawns to get you to succumb to the madness and finally say, you know what, I've had enough of this crap. It's got to be Trump's fault because there's no way these people are fighting it. I'm just going to vote for Biden and hope it all goes away. I'm here to tell you folks, it isn't going away. If Biden wins, it gets worse. It gets way worse. These shock troops will be in a neighborhood near you. They'll be in your grocery store parking lots. They'll be at your door. This gets worse from here. Because they want to beat the American public into submission. They want power and control. And they're willing to do anything to get it. So, you've got the shock troops that beat you down. So, why is all this happening? Why is all this happening? In the communist agenda, they talk about infiltrating both parties, right? Capture them. So let me ask you this. You had people who resigned from government when Trump won. You had people resign in corporate, very high, powerful corporate positions. You had people in the bureaucracy retire and get out. Why? Why? Because they had an inkling that it was a toss-up whether or not the socialism side of this wins, and they don't want to go down with the ship. But the left is going down, and they're not going to go down without a fight. And they're not going to go down until they've pulled every trick in the book that they can try to use to get Trump out and get rid of him and move their little puppet in there. Do you notice that Biden made a hint that Hillary might be his pick for VP? God forbid. Can you just imagine? Seriously. God forbid that. If you ever... I can't even pray for that because that's a sin. So, the last thing I want to bring to your attention before I close this show out. So a lot of us that, I know a lot of people who subscribe to my show, and there's not a lot of you, and I really don't care if I can get through to one of you and change your heart and your mind and see the world as it really is without rose-colored glasses. I don't care, but a lot of you live in suburbia. A lot of the people that I know in my personal life live in suburbia. They don't live in the downtown core of a city. They don't live on the fringe of a city. They live outside the city, and they enjoy their life because they want peace, they want quiet, they want to send their kids to a good school, they want peace and tranquility, they want to be able to leave their home and go to a park right around the corner and be out in nature. They want to be around other like-minded people who are conservative in thought, because the cities are just running rampant with socialism and left-leaning goons. So there's a collective clique of conservatism in the suburbs. You're going to find liberals out here, but for the most part, those liberals are probably more centerline Democrats rather than being the far-left extremists. And this whole show, I'm not talking about these center Democrats. I'm not. So if you take me at that, I don't. I think you sit on the fence, and I think the news media, if you listen to the left-wing news media and you believe anything they have to say, you need to get your head checked. Seriously. So I'm not really talking to you unless you have a belief system that's too far left. But Biden wants to take over where Obama left off with the eradication of suburbia, and Biden wants to take it to the next extreme. So we're going to examine that, because your kids, my kids, your grandchildren's kids, they go to school in these suburbs. And this is going to directly impact everything. But it's just another thing to prove that these people are just, they're out of their minds. They are out of their minds. So the media has been running a full-blown offensive against the drug ever since President Trump. Oh, hang on. We're back into hydroxychloroquine. I brought up the wrong article. So, to sum up, CNN has an article on hydroxychloroquine that says that hydroxychloroquine actually saves lives. They finally were exposed. They had to put out the study that came out that I talked about a few minutes ago. So I'm moving on to what my point of this was. So Biden and Dems are set to abolish the suburbs. Yeah, I wasn't making that up. So this gentleman, this writer, he says, I've been studying Joe Biden's housing plans, and what I've seen is both surprising and frightening. I expected that a President Biden would enforce the Obama administration's radical AFFH, Affirmative Furthering Fair Housing regulation, to the hilt. That is exactly what Biden promises to do. By itself, that would be more than enough to end America's suburbs as we've known them, as I've explained repeatedly here at NRO. What surprises me is that Biden has actually promised to go much further than the AFFH. Biden has embraced Cory Booker's strategy for ending single-family zoning in the suburbs and creating what you might call little downtowns in the suburbs. In my town, the people of Tallinn, do you remember what they wanted to build right behind the subway and the strip club and the liquor store? Yeah. I told you Agenda 21. I told this town that at the town hall meeting. So it says here, combine the Obama-Biden administration's radical AFF regulation with Booker's new strategy, and I don't see how the suburbs can retain their ability to govern themselves. It will mean the end of local control, the end of a style of living that many people prefer to the city, and therefore the end of meaningful choice in how Americans can live and conduct their lives. Shouldn't voters know that this is what's at stake in this coming election? It's no exaggeration to say that progressive urbanists have long dreamed of abolishing the suburbs. In fact, I've explained it all in a book. Initially, these anti-suburban radicals wanted large cities to simply annex their surrounding suburbs. The people that watch my show from Ottawa, Canada, you remember when the amalgamation happened with Ottawa and Nepean and Gloucester and all the rest of the suburbs that became enveloped into the city of Ottawa. The town of Metcalfe, which is 30 miles outside the city of Ottawa, is now part of the city of Ottawa. You don't have your rights anymore, and you're taxed to death. And you get no services except for garbage pickup and snowplow. And your streets are crap. That's what's coming to America with annexation. Once progressives discovered it had since become illegal for a city to annex its surrounding suburbs without voter consent, that's what happened in Ottawa. They hoodwinked the voters of Ottawa into it by promises that were made and never kept. They cooked up a strategy that would amount to the same thing. This de facto annexation strategy had three parts. One, use a kind of quota system to force economic integration on the suburbs, pushing urban residents outside the city. Close down suburban growth by regulating development, restricting automobile use, and limiting highway growth and repair, thus forcing would-be suburbanites back into the city. Use state and federal laws to force suburbs to redistribute tax revenue. Redistribute tax revenues to poorer cities in their greater metropolitan regions. You understand? I've told you about this since I started doing these shows. If you force urbanites into suburbs, force suburbanites back into cities, and redistribute suburban tax revenue, then presto, you have effectively abolished the suburbs. And they can do this, folks, in a matter of 5 to 10 years. It takes one 8-year presidency. And remember, folks, Biden's just a puppet. If Biden gets elected, he will be removed like that. And they'll have his vice president in there, and they will claim the 25th Amendment that they tried to get Trump on Biden. Mark my words. If it happens, when it happens, mark my words, he is gone. They will put the vice president in. They will have him up on the 25th Amendment that he's mentally incapacitated and he can't run the country. He can't do his professional chief executive officer duties. And then they'll have another vice president. And who's that going to be? Could it be Ilhan Omar? Could it be Nancy Pelosi? Could it be Chuck Schumer? Could it be Adam Schiff? Cory Booker? Take your pick. You don't have many choices, folks. You've got Trump, or you have socialism, mayhem, chaos, death and destruction, cities being burned, looted, your kids not going to school, the shock troops coming to your door, your taxes going up on everything, including now your property taxes out in the country where you still get no services, but you like your peace and tranquility. So, I'm going to sum up. I want to thank you, first of all, for watching. This has been a long show, but I think it's been well worth it because I think there was a point to this show that this has been going on for a long time. I've talked about it, and I wanted to prove it to you that this has been an agenda and a slow, forced march to get to where we are today. And we need to stop it dead in its tracks. We need to take back our country, whether it's by the ballot box, or if we lose the ballot box and it's by crooked voting, then we need to take it back by bullet box. I'm sorry to say that, folks, but that's our only choice here. This country is going to go into the toilet, and our kids are going to pay the price. Our kids are already going to pay the price for this economic package that they've already passed, and if Pelosi gets her way, I'm sorry to say, our kids' economic future is very grim, and that's putting it really politely. So, remember, the goal of the Communist Party is to control the media. Control the media. Well, they control education, they control the medical field, they control politics, they control the judiciary. And there's only one thing that stands in the way, folks, and that's Trump. So remember that they control the media, and they're trying to control the narrative. They who control the media control the programming. And that's what they've done to the other half of the population in this country. They've programmed them to be mindless drones, to just follow along and do whatever. You, as a silent patriot, the silent majority, you need to start standing up. I swear to God, you need to start informing those around you who have a different political bent that you think you can show them the light and bring them to the truth. You need to wake people up. We don't have much time, folks. We have just a little over 100 days. The fate of our country is just a little over 100 days from today. It's that close, folks. We're at 11:59:59. You need to really wake up. You need to get people involved. You need to get involved. You need to take back this government from the municipal government right on up. We can't let them control our country anymore. We can't lose our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. We have the most glorious thing on earth. We have freedom. If we lose it here, folks, the whole world's doomed. We're the world's last hope. I know that sounds prophetic and whatever, but it's the truth. If you really think about the full context of what's coming, that's the God's honest truth. I don't know how to say it any plainer. So all I can say, and you might remember what I said to the superintendent, they need to get our kids back in school. And meanwhile, the left parrots that they're doing this for our kids' safety, and they're keeping them out of school for our safety. So this all started because Trump said the kids need to go back to school, right? And then all of a sudden the left threw a fit. So I started thinking about that, and I thought, okay, it doesn't matter what Trump says, the Democrats always do the opposite. So all I can say, my final thought is, I'm really hoping that Trump comes out very soon and says that oxygen is the best thing ever. I really hope Trump comes out and says oxygen is the #1 best thing that a human body could ever get. So with that being said, folks, thanks for watching. If you like the show, hit the like button. If you think what I have to say has any value and you enjoyed it and learned something here, please hit the subscribe button. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much. Have a great week. Stay safe.